Hello and welcome to Scilence, a podcast where women get really honest about surviving and thriving in what often feels like a man's world. My guests are Wonder Women from the fields of science, technology, engineering and mathematics, or STEM, where inclusivity and diversity can be a real problem. I know this only too well as a female Southeast Asian mechanical engineer. I was kind of a minority within a minority. I'm Dr. Shanice O'Mara, an engineer turned broadcaster. Throughout my career, I've worked on and reported on some cutting-edge technology and innovation. And through my TV work, I've met some incredibly inspiring women from a diverse range of STEM fields. Talking to these exceptional ladies has often left me feeling empowered, hopeful, and excited about life. I believe Scilence will enrich you too. Every week, a woman in STEM shares her unique experiences with absolutely no pressure in having to promote her accomplishments or guard her impressive reputation. Because I've come to realise that everyone is just way more open and relaxed when they're anonymous. So I deliberately disguise my guest voices so that we're just connecting as human beings rather than human doings. It's my hope that you really relate to what we chat about today. If so, please do subscribe to Scilence and maybe even rate and review the show. I'd love to have your feedback. This week, my guest is in the field of science journalism. Hello.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Oh, thank you so much for coming on this show. I cannot wait to talk to you because the last time I heard you speak, you were, on a stage and kind of untouchable. Mm-hmm. But the way you talked about science was just so engaging and even with a non-science background, I would have been transfixed by what you had to say.
Oh, I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, I love the fact that you are so passionate about a whole range of sciences. You're not kind of specific to one, but you started off studying maths, didn't you?
Yeah, no, I've always been excited by all different areas of science. There's never, although actually saying that, biology was always the one that I sort of avoided, mainly because my mum had done biology at university and then she never did anything with it. She did zoology. She never did anything with it. And she then did a lot of writing and a lot of other bits and bobs with her work. And I don't know if it was just sort of rebellion against what your mum does, but I was always kind of teasing her and saying, oh, biology's boring, it's the easy science, whereas I was far more interested in maths, physics and chemistry, but predominantly maths. And but yeah, when I went to study it, I think I had this real urge to try and get to the center of things. I really wanted to understand how everything worked in a really perfect way. And really, if you sort of, there's that famous XKCD comic where you have this sort of they put all the different sciences on a time, or not a timeline, like a line from applied to pure, and right at the very end you've got the pure mathematicians being like, hey guys, we're over here. And that kind of just resonated with me. I always wanted to kind of try and understand things at the very, very root, and then I knew that if I could understand that, I would be able to build my knowledge back up on top of all the other sciences. So I went and studied pure maths.
Right. I really resonate with that because I think the reason why I went into science was because I just wanted to get to the truth.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly it.
Yeah. And how has that gone for you? Because living in the world we live in, there's a lot of untruth.
Well, I think the fact that I'm now a journalist probably, I hate when people kind of, careers are wiggly and they go up and down and it's sort of snakes and ladders. And if you told me 3 years ago that I was going to be a writer and a journalist, I would have laughed at you. I would have thought that was absolutely crazy.
Really?
Yeah, definitely. I didn't aspire to be a writer. I didn't aspire to be a journalist. And it's not that I don't like what I'm doing. I absolutely love what I'm doing, but I think I never really thought I would be capable of doing it. Maybe I kind of held journalists up on this sort of pedestal beforehand. But saying that, because what I'm saying is I don't think we can kind of tie back our decisions through our lives all back to one central point. I think that there's a lot of chance. However, if you do sort of change. Yes, exactly. But if you map all the different things I've done, there is an element of always either being in a job and being really, really frustrated by the kind of lack of being upfront, not lying, but like the lack of people just saying what's on their mind and being allowed to saying what's on their mind, speaking up, being told, oh, just do your time and stay in your place and you're junior and all this, and being so unbelievably frustrated by that. And I guess now doing the work I do, I mean, I've just written a book that's all about, how do we actually get to the root of what's really going on? And I think I'm really, really obsessed with trying to understand entire systems. But in order to do that, you kind of have to understand the little cogs and sort of home truths at the center of it in order to kind of then expand out everything else. So, if you were to sort of tie a thread through my career, it makes complete sense that I would study pure maths and then build everything on top of that. I mean, nowadays, I feel like I've sort of, there's always new stuff to learn in science, and I'm absolutely not an expert in every single part of it. But nowadays, I'm actually focusing a lot of my kind of research and kind of learning on the worlds of history and philosophy and economics, because I feel like I'm now at the point of going, okay, let's start layering on all of that stuff. Now I've quote unquote done the maths, the physics, the chemistry, and I've also now done the biology, I suppose, with a lot of my work. So I'm now trying to layer on, what does law look like, and what's the sort of central economic theories, and even literature. Because I guess I don't know, I'm just really obsessed with trying to have some level of understanding of essentially just how the world works. And it started with pure maths, and I'm now, reading tons of fiction. So I suppose it's all the same.
I mean, it's quite amazing that we're having this conversation and that you are the guest for this week, because I'm actually going through exactly that, where I'm trying to grapple with the fact that I am so in awe of what science can tell us. It's beautiful. It's beautiful that we are able to kind of unravel the formulas of the universe. At the same time, I do get very disheartened by how that can be manipulated. So, for example, with climate change, I remember doing a story where I was actually sort of collecting data with NASA scientists about how an ice sheet over Greenland was shrinking year on year. And I was just in absolute awe of the instruments and the data and the way we were collecting that information. And I remember having a conversation with the scientists saying, what is your view on climate change? And they were like, we're not going to say, because, our job is to collect the data. How it's interpreted is up to the politicians, the people, all of that. We just want to collect the hard facts. And I was like, just thinking, I'm so in that camp of just wanting to collect the hard facts. But I find today everyone has to have an opinion. Like, you have to be either, arguing on one side or the other. And I don't want to take that position. I don't want to have to choose a side.
Yeah.
Like, how do you deal with that in journalism?
I mean, I guess I don't necessarily think it's about sides, but I'm quite values driven, and I kind of have no interest in writing about stuff that don't fit into my values, or if things that are kind of making news or being talked about that I think don't make sense, then I'll write a piece about why they don't make sense. I mean, I think I'm in a fortunate position that, first of all, I'm freelance, so I don't have to. I'm not a staff journalist, so I'm not dictated by editors on what I cover. And I'm also not a news journalist. So I don't just kind of, not just news journalists have an extremely hard job. Like I'm not a news journalist because I think it's too hard, but I don't just cover what's happening and, say this happened and then let the audience make up. I'm a features journalist. I write opinion, and the book is, and it's from my perspective. So I'm in a position where actually I can marry my sort of skills and research in journalism, as well as an expertise that I've built up over the many different jobs I've had and the kind of what I did at university and just, my life, I suppose, that I can have an opinion and I have a voice. And that's one of the things that makes me so excited about my work. And I'm so grateful that I get to do that every single day, because I'm in a fortunate position that because I didn't start my career in journalism, I'm coming at my writing from a position of, the quote unquote expert. You know, you're the person that understands science. And because I spent a lot of time in industry as well, I really understand how the companies work, how funding works, how the politics around it works. And so when editors commission me to do something, or when I'm asked to come and do a talk, they want me to give my opinion. They don't want me to just cover something and explain it. They want me to say, okay, Gemma, what is quantum computing and what's complex about it, or what's exciting about it, or what are the questions that you have? I mean, not everybody understands that. Sometimes people do just want an explanation, but most of the time, what I'm and I don't just give an explanation if I'm asked for it. I will say, you know, this is what quantum computing is. Here are some of the controversies. I think some of the funding is way out of whack. I think that some of the companies are marketing themselves in a way that's completely unethical. But then I also think that there's some really amazing stuff happening here and here and here. And you know, for me, I can't write any other way. I find it boring, and it's not what I want to do if I'm only getting to just cover something. I want to be able to layer the context around science. And that's something that I feel insanely strong about. And I think, you know, we were talking before about science communication and kind of the different ways of doing it. I feel really, really strongly that the best way to do science communication, not the only way, but the best way, and the way we need more of, is a critical look at science. And that doesn't mean saying science is bad or wrong or whatever. That's not what I mean by critical. By critical, I mean not just explaining the Doppler effect and then leaving it at that. It's about saying, this is how it's used. This is how it might be problematic. This is where the politics comes in. There's a reason this person is saying this, and there's a reason this person is saying that. What are the incentive structures? You know, and I think that kind of not putting science into that broader context, frankly, doesn't do it justice. And you can make science far more interesting when you talk about the context around it. Because if you just explain something, folk that aren't really that interested in the nitty gritty nuts and bolts like we are of the tools and the data and whatnot, you're just going to lose them, because they're going to be like, all right, cool. And it's also not about pandering to.
I now know what a neutron is. Thank you very much. Like, how does that affect me? What's the point of knowing that?
Exactly. But at the same time, it's also not about pandering to this idea of how does it affect me, because I think sometimes we go too far in making leaps, being like, and this is how it affects you in your everyday life. You know, yeah, a discovery of a new form of, I don't know, quark, it probably isn't going to affect most people in their everyday life, you know, not immediately anyway. And if it does, it's probably going to be years and years in the future. And it's going to be some scientist having some kind of moment of going, oh, hang on a minute, you know. So that sort of stuff you can't predict. But the point I'm trying to make is I think the system itself is interesting. The way we do science, the way science mixes in with politics, the way, I don't know, we read about science, the words we use, like all of that stuff is another layer of what makes science interesting. And it's not about just explaining or going, and here's how it's going to change your health or whatever. There's more in the middle. And I think it's fundamentally, what's the word? You're not respecting the audience if you only do one of these two extremes. Giving that context, giving the long read, giving the system, that is interesting. People find it interesting. And I think when people in science journalism or science communication say, oh, people won't be interested in this, I'm like, you're essentially saying that people are stupid, and it's unbelievably disrespectful and frankly lazy. So I don't know. I just think I suppose I'm lucky that I find it really fun trying to get to the root of systems. I love writing long reads. I mean, as I say, I wrote this book and I'm now working on my next one. And I loved the opportunity to go really deep in the weeds and try and get to the root of things. I know not everyone loves that. But for me, I'm just, you know, grateful that I get to do something that I both think is the right thing to do, but also I enjoy it, you know?
I mean, the question that's screaming out at me is, where did you find the confidence to voice your opinion? Because particularly as a woman in STEM, you know, you were probably a minority in math. Where did you find the confidence to say my opinion is valid?
I've always been that kid in class that put their hand up all the time. I was annoying at school probably in that respect. I always ask questions. I've never worried about looking stupid, and mainly because I know that I'm not stupid. I know that, you know. I was at school. I was the smart kid. You know, I was top of the classes, or one of the top in the classes in all of the subjects, not just science. And I was very, very encouraged in terms of my, you know, ability to do well at school by teachers, by my parents, by everyone. But I was also really badly bullied at school. And because I was a tomboy, I played football. And because I frankly was really, really bad at knowing when gossip was happening. So like when all the girls were kind of hanging out at break or whatever, I'd be off playing football with the boys. And then when I went to high school, that wasn't a thing. You didn't play football at break. So I was like, oh, like, what do I just talk to girls? Like, that's kind of, I don't really, like, I don't get it. And so,
Yeah.
I don't know, I struggled a lot with the sort of social stuff when I first went to high school. And I'd been bullied in primary school as well for being a tomboy. So I was kind of used to being the person that folk didn't really get, shall we say. And there's not that I didn't have friends, but I had,
A bit of an oddball.
well, I don't think I was an oddball. I think I just was the only person that wasn't willing to conform. And not because I was like this kind of, I don't want to conform. I was too young to understand that. I just didn't really understand how. Like I didn't know what the cool trainers were to wear, or I didn't really know what it meant to gossip or to, have these cliques. Like I just didn't get it. And so, for me, it was like, I did just say my mind. So if someone was mean to someone, I would be like, why are you being mean? Or if someone was mean to me, I would tell them, why are you being mean? And, I would come home crying from school and I had a times really horrific time. But because of my intelligence, I guess, was my thing. And my parents, my mum got bullied in school, my dad also got bullied in school. So they were very like, you know, this is shit and we know that this is awful, but you mustn't change, do not conform, do not try and be like them, because you will be happy about it later in life, I'm telling you. And obviously I don't think, oh, it was good that I was bullied, but at the same time I genuinely would not be who I was if I'd not had to basically be that outsider for such a long time. And I don't know, because my sort of doing well in school was the thing I could kind of hold on to. It was the thing that I was good at. And even if I got bullied for being intelligent, I didn't care. I was like, well, I'm clever and you're not. So it just doesn't bother me. So I don't know, I guess having that from a very young age all the way through high school, I guess I just kind of got used to it. And then when I went to uni, I actually wasn't, I went to St Andrews, which is like a really good university, and I wasn't the most intelligent anymore. And that was a real shock to the system. I didn't really know what to do about that. Um, and so I lost my way a little bit in science at that point. But then I ended up in other industries where I also felt, this doesn't work, or this is a stupid idea, or why are we doing that? That makes no sense. And I would say it and people wouldn't like it. But, I was like, but it doesn't make sense. And I don't understand why I have to keep my mouth shut. I mean, I understood sort of corporate bureaucracy and all that sort of thing, but at the same time, I just didn't like it. I thought it was stupid. So I don't know. I think I've always just got this very kind of, it's not a practical thing. It's kind of just it's a very like, this just makes no sense and I don't understand why people do it. So I say that. And then I think luckily, I suppose because this is science, I'm not going to reveal my accent because you're going to cover it over, but I have a quite regional accent, and my regional accent is associated with being quite feisty and quite angry and quite opinionated, but also in London, people don't understand the class that I come from based on my accent. They just know that I'm from a particular country. And so it meant that I didn't really get much discrimination. I come from a working class background. I don't get discrimination based on my class because people don't know my class, but they do assume that I'm going to be opinionated, and they don't brand me as an angry woman. They brand me as an angry insert accent here. And so as much as that can sometimes be a little bit like demeaning in terms of who I am as an individual, it's very, very helpful when you're in a room of men, because they don't look at me and go, oh, that's, that person.
She's a pushover.
Exactly. But they also don't brand me as like an angry female, like some women get,
Right.
if you're bossy or whatever, like I don't get thought
Or
of
if you're
that.
just standing up for yourself, you
Yes,
can be
exactly.
seen as.
Well, not just that. Like I think people just assume that this is just how I talk, but I'm like, it's actually not really how I talk. It's only when I think things are stupid that I'll say it. But I think I'm actually relatively
Oh my
tender.
gosh, you're getting away with standing up for yourself.
Yeah, that's what I
because
mean.
of your accent.
That's my point.
So I
That's
envy you
precisely,
for
yeah.
that.
I'm so lucky in that respect, and I think,
Because you know what? When I stand up for myself, I'm seen as crazy,
yeah,
stubborn,
yes, exactly,
um, you know, difficult,
exactly,
problem child, all
exactly.
those things, because I don't, I generally have, London kind of accent,
Mm,
you know, I guess people could say that, she's educated and all of that. So the minute I
Yeah,
stand up for myself, I'm seen as uncouth and
exactly.
unladylike and all of that. Oh my gosh.
Exactly. And because I've always been, I've been this outsider. I've been the person that's not really known probably when to shut up and be like, this doesn't make any sense. And people kind of assuming that I'm going to do that anyway. And then when I do it in a work context, people are like, it's just because she's from this country. She's just like that. But actually, she has a point. I think it means people take me a little bit more seriously. But I don't think it's just my accent. I think it's also because I do speak my mind a lot, and I'm not controversial. I'm not the sort of person I'm not mean to people. I don't call people out in that respect. But, I remember a job I had that wasn't in the sciences. It was in a different industry that I did after university. And we got asked by the client to do this particular piece of work. And they knew that I had a maths background. So they basically gave it to me. And I said to them, I was like, this is not a job that this client should be giving us because we're massively undercharging. I was like, if they asked a consultant to do this, it would be about 10 times the price. And I knew that because I used to work in investment banking and I did the exact that, it was data analysis they want me to do. And I was like, I was on over double the pay at that company for doing this exact job. So I'm not doing it for you guys for no money. And you should not be saying to the client, yeah, no bother, we'll do this really complex data analysis with our junior account person who shouldn't know how to do data analysis, but she just happens to have a maths background for no money. And so I said this to them just exactly like that. I was like 8 months into my job, and the senior guy was like, I don't understand what you're talking about. And I was like, consultants charge insane amounts for this. Why are we doing that? That makes no business sense. And I said, and for me personally, I'm not getting paid enough to do that job. I left banking to come to this job for less, I got less than half the money in my salary. So I'm not doing the same work as I did there. Absolutely not. And they pushed back on the client and I didn't have to do it. But no other person on my level, at my I was so junior, would have said that, but also they wouldn't have known to say it because they didn't have that background I had. But I just thought it was so ludicrous that I was getting asked this. I wasn't angry. I was just so shocked. I was like, this is like,
you were trying to be
and
fair.
I've got, yes, because I have such a real, it runs in my family. And I think also the sort of communities that I come from, fairness and justness is like really, really central to our kind of being. Like I get really, really upset when things are unfair, and not just me in my own life, but like in general, like watching politics, sometimes I find it so hard because like when I see something that's just unfair, like on the surface of it unfair, it really, really bothers me.
Yeah.
And so obviously, right. Yeah, it really does. And so if there's things happening to me that I feel are unfair, I will say something because I just I'm not very good at stomaching it if it's not. So yeah, I think that's also part of it.
Are you getting away with speaking your mind purely because of your accent? Or do you think there are other things
No,
about
no, of
your
course
inner
not.
personality that allows you to
Um,
express yourself that way?
um, people are just people. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've never really been that sort of like, I don't really shy away from seniority. Like, I don't, see someone who's super senior and be like, oh, I better say this and I better say that. Like, I don't know where I got that from, but I'm just very aware that every person is just a person. And if you're talking to a CEO who's age 50 or 60, I'm always like, oh, that's someone's dad or someone's granddad. Like, it's just a person.
In
So,
listening to you speak, I must say that I can totally see why you're freelance. And I really relate to you because I've spent most of my life being freelance. But I must say that to be able to function in a corporate scenario requires different skills, right?
I could not do it. I did it. I was in corporate for in total about 3.5 years. And my last 2 years of it, I was in a role where essentially I was, doing my own thing anyway. And so the first, 2 years of it, or a year and a half, whatever it was, I found so
Yeah.
difficult. I couldn't keep my mouth shut. I felt hard done by all the time, and I was just frustrated and like, and I was a bit petulant at times where I was sort of being like, I've got more to offer than this.
Yeah.
I've got more potential, and they don't understand me, and they're not listening to me, and da 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 da. So, but I think the core thing that I have was, first of all, I moved out of those positions as soon as I possibly can to get into a position still within corporate that worked for me. And then I got made redundant in 2016, and that was a bit of a shock to the system because I'd always been this sort of high achiever, and I was like, wait, what? Because my whole department got shut down, so it wasn't anything sort of individual. Um, but after that, because I would never have thought of freelancing, but because the sort of thing people seem to worry about freelancing is they think it's really unstable and so on and so forth. And I'm like, well, when you've lost your job,
Right.
that's the most unstable you can possibly be, because you're relying on someone else for salary. You suddenly don't have it and you don't know what to do. Whereas with me, freelance, if I have a month I'm not earning as much, I'm like, well, I can just go get more work. And obviously it's harder than that. But the point I'm making is,
You're in control.
For me, it wasn't.
You're not dependent.
I was in control. But exactly. And I accidentally learned that this was for me. I wouldn't have known beforehand. I just thought I had to find the right corporate job or the right boss, the right this, that, and the other. But I think a lot of it is the having to conform to whatever a boss thinks or work in a team. And frankly, I'm just not very good at that. I'm not great at working in teams. I'm much better working on my own or working into one person like an editor. Because, I annoy people and I don't know, I'm not patient. So
you saying that is so reassuring because first of all, my experience of work has been the exact reverse to you, where I have always been freelance purely because I love working on my own. I feel so much more creative that way. I can be expressive. I am in charge of my own destiny, it feels like.
Exactly.
My success is based on how much hard work I put in.
Yeah, you don't need anyone else to give you a pay rise or move your job or do a speech about you in front of other people. Like, if you earn a lot that month, that's because you've done a bloody good job, and that's that, full stop.
And also, it doesn't sound like you suffer from this, but when you really care about what other people think, it's so much easier to work on your own.
Oh, I care about what other people think. Oh no, I definitely suffer from that to some degree. I don't really care what people think of. No, that's not true. I actually really care what people think. I care about being seen as
seen accurately.
Yes, and I care about being seen as worthy of having an opinion. And I a lot of the time that is part of the reason I think why I was driven to investment banking, because of the prestige factor. And then, the industry I worked in after was advertising. I was driven to that because people who work in advertising are seen as creative and, interesting and da 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 da. And when I got made redundant, it was that sort of way. I was like, oh shit, I don't really have something to kind of rely on. I don't really know how to explain myself. People are a bit kind of like, what do you do for a living? Like, who are you? And so I care. I really do care what people think in that respect. And I really, really want. It's not that I want people to agree with me. I want people to think that I can argue a point well, or I can explain something well. I care a lot about what people think of my style of writing because I'm not a trained writer. So, I'm kind of, if someone says they like my style of writing or they like the way I write or they think I'm a good writer, that is like one of the biggest compliments to me. Only the second only to, I understand what you were trying to say. Because being understood for me is actually the main thing. I just want people to not misunderstand me.
I get it. I literally have been saying that over and over in my current work situation because I'm seen as not being, this is getting really personal. I didn't realize it was going to go in this direction, but I'm seen as not being able to take direction, not a good team player, and refusing to be given instruction. And you know what? Like, I personally believe that I am all those things, but I absolutely can't do any of those things when I don't respect the people that are dishing that stuff out. So if I'm working with someone that I really respect and rate, and I'm just like, wow, you're amazing. Oh my God, I can take all the direction in the world. If someone is lame and delivering a message in a very condescending, patronizing, you're really stupid kind of way, I switch off. I simply switch off because I want to learn from great people.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. And I think this is part of my thing about, my kind of realization that freelance is probably better for me and better for other people too, is because
Yeah.
I think if you make the decision to work in a company, um, you do have to, everything has pros and cons, right? And I think if you make a decision to work in a company, which I have done even as a freelancer, I've done it as a contractor, doing 3 days a week in a company, all that sort of thing. I've had to have a conversation with myself and say, look, you're not gonna get your way all the time. You're going to have to take direction from people that you don't necessarily agree with, and I don't like that I sometimes don't respect people. I think I can be really bad for making a snap judgment about, and I really have to have a lot of conversations with myself in that respect, where I can very
Mm.
quickly be like, they don't know what they're talking about, and that's wrong of me.
Yeah.
I do need to be much better at actually,
Is
maybe
that
I'm a,
because you're so bright?
I mean, I don't know. I think I don't think of myself as, I know I'm really confident. But I don't, and I know that I'm good at what I do. But at the same time, I
Mm.
don't think I'm all knowledgeable. I spend a lot of time asking people, oh, am I doing the right thing? Should I do this? Should I do that?
Mm.
But sometimes when I think I'm quite good at getting a quick measure of people. And I
Yeah.
think having worked in advertising, there's quite a lot of people that work in advertising that I
Are full of
talk the
shit.
talk. Yeah, for lack of a better word, yeah. And so when you're getting instructions of someone who, in my mind, is very clearly that person, I really, really struggle to take them seriously. And because, I mean, you'll be the same, because I've been freelance, or I am freelance, and I'm working in a sort of, as a contractor, I was like, I have no skin in the game. I have no bureaucracy here. I don't have to please you, because I can just not work for this client anymore. I don't have to try and get a
You can just
promotion here.
walk
I don't have to
away.
get a rise. Exactly. And so I'm very like, I don't think this is a good idea. And there's been times that I've worked with people who've been like, they haven't actually, I've never been told that I'm hard to work with or anything like that. But I have been told that I'm stubborn, or that, I'm not understanding the project. And I'm like, yeah, maybe I'm not understanding the project. Maybe I'm not understanding the client wants something that's actually not that great. They just want something that, I don't know, is done, or satisfies another goal, or satisfies their marketing manager who's never actually made anything in their life. They've just happened to end up in a marketing job and are dictating what we should do without any experience. And we have to listen because they're the ones paying. Um,
Yeah.
so I think that there's times that you do have to sort of take a step back and be like, I chose to be here.
Yeah. I mean, it comes back to truth, I feel, because for me,
Mm,
you know, truth is about, you know, like the world's greatest leaders. I mean, they are undeniably worthy of that title because they're just great leaders. They may not do everything perfectly, but they just have an aura about them that make them great leaders. Those kinds of people I'm able to follow. But when there's
yeah.
a lack of truth, where it's bullshit, people have got to where they are through manipulation and
Mm, mhm, mhm,
dishonesty and, shrewdness, I'm like, I
mm.
don't want to work with that. Like, but I
I
think
think
I'm
it's
actually quite extreme in my view because truth for me is so fundamentally beautiful. It's like mathematics.
yes,
It's like engineering.
yes.
Like you can't argue with gravity. It just is.
I think there's something though to be said about, and this is why I think I'm really obsessed with systems, because I think that what I've learned from working in various different kinds of companies, and then being a freelancer and kind of looking at things from the outside and all that sort of thing, I realize that a lot of the time the way that you get stuff done, the way you progress, whatever, it's all a game, right? And the way that you succeed at these games isn't always by truth, and that annoys the hell out of me. But there's something to be said about, if you can learn how a system works, if you understand incentives, if you understand why people are making decisions. Is it because they want to go home early, or is it because they get a pay rise, or is it because the person they respect has told them to do it? And whether or not that's right or wrong, of course, they're going to follow them. If you can, and for me, it's like, I get really obsessed with being like, okay, how does this system work that drives particular behavior? And then if I can understand the system, then I can fit in a way that's going to feel right to me. And particularly if I can understand where that lack of truth, as you call it, is I can then either compound it or I can know why something's happening and be able to sort of rationalize. So, like an example, for instance, like I'm really obsessed with looking at the incentive structures within academia, right? So, like publishing and looking at, why do people, publish fraudulent results, or why do certain PIs only work with certain people, or why do certain journals only take certain things? Why do only certain people get funding? And these questions to some people can feel very like, this makes no sense. I don't get it. The system doesn't work, blah, blah, blah. But when you actually dive into how science works, it makes complete sense. It's not fair. It's not right, but it makes sense in terms of a system that turns and a system that churns. The system is not designed right, in my opinion, but the system works perfectly fine based on the design that it has. And so for me, I think that's why I get really obsessed with trying to work out systems, because when I've been in a system, whether it's a corporate or the government, like, or whatever, it's like, and I don't get it, it's so frustrating because you're just sitting there going, I don't get why someone's doing this. Why did they get promoted? Why did that thing happen? Da, 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 da. And it doesn't fit in with my feelings of both fairness and truth. And so I don't know, like, I think that the way to succeed.
But how do you deal with that? How do you deal with the fact that something doesn't fit within the realm of fairness or truth?
Well, I either call it out or I don't associate myself with it. Like I left advertising because I felt it was fundamentally unfair. And I also think, I think the industry has many, many, many problems in terms of its output. But I also just think the way that the structure of agencies, the way prestige is given to certain people, the way creatives versus the account people are treated as these kind of gods, and the way that clients are, the client says jump, you say hi, all that stuff. I completely understand now why that is what it is, because I've spent a lot of time trying to work it out. And I hate it. I think that it's stupid, and I think that it's misattribution of certain forms of credibility and creativity. But it's the way it is, and I'm not going to change it. And so if so I've got to be like, okay, how do I want to utilize my knowledge about this industry? Well, if I'm needing a bit extra money, I'm going to do a bit of copywriting. And luckily, I know who commissions copywriters and what kind of agencies are a bit better than others or whatever else. And I will deliberately put myself in a situation where I know I can write something good that they'll like, they'll pay me, and everyone wins without me having to deal with all the stuff that I really don't like. So, I think it's about either that, working out the system and then deciding where you fit and how you fit, or it's being an outsider and being okay with being an outsider, which I am almost everywhere I go, because of, and I quite like being an outsider. I quite like being that person that's frankly allowed to say these sorts of things. I don't, we're doing this anonymously, right? But anything I'm saying, I would happily say with my own voice, genuinely. And I'm very lucky that I can do that. And I know that so many people cannot. Women, people of color, people from, non-able-bodied people, all different stuff. Like, I have a lot more power, and I'm very, very aware of that. But then I think that the only way for me to make sense of that is to tell the truth and be reasonable and call out stuff. And again, it's not about trying to be mean to anyone. It's just about being realistic and not like, drinking the Kool-Aid or anything. And luckily, because my work, that's part of the USP of my work, because I'm a media person, because I'm, brought in to give opinions on stuff. They want someone who's going to, quote unquote, give real talk. That's literally what I do for a living. But I know that I'm insanely lucky to get to do that.
Yeah, when I think of women in STEM who are actually conforming just to be part of a system, because the fear of being freelance or an individual is just too scary. It's too, generally people think a freelance lifestyle is unstable, insecure, and you've got to be really hard to survive in that kind of world. I personally think it just screams out freedom, and I don't value money enough to shy away from the freelance world. Yet I have chosen a more corporate structure just to see what it's like. And what I'm finding is that,
and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, it's an experiment. And what I'm finding is that, you do have to compromise on your kind of not necessarily values, but you have to compromise on being there for oneself.
I think as well, there's a lot to be said about what the type of job you're doing. I mean, being a freelance researcher is almost not a thing. So if you want to be, someone who's actually in the lab doing
Mm,
experiments and stuff, you don't really have the choice about being freelance. You choose who your PI is, you choose which group you want to be in, but that's kind of the limit of your choice. And even then, that's still, you don't really have full control of that. As a journalist, I mean, freelance journalism is very normal. If anything, there's probably, freelancing is far more popular now because so many places can't afford staff
mm,
writers. So, it's actually very comfortable, not comfortable, but like there's a lot of other freelance journalists who I can meet up with, who I get advice from, da 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 da. The same as you, I don't value money in the same way. Although actually I get paid a lot more now than I used to in my
mm,
previous job, but that's a separate thing. But I don't value money enough to jump into a job that pays a lot, and I don't I've sort of I'm kind of like, I've done the corporate thing. I get it. I've had the learnings from it, and that's not to say I'll never jump back in. If there's a good opportunity, I would take it. But I definitely now know a bit more about my own value system, that I would have to find a job that fulfills that. But I don't know. Like, I think it's very, very dependent on what you do, and I think particularly if you're a researcher or an engineer or someone who's building stuff, you almost have to work in a lab or for a company. You don't really have the choice.
and you have to adopt their values.
You have to. And I think part of the compromise of being a freelancer is actually, in some sense, you compromise on immediate impact, because you have to create your own form of impact. If you're from the outside, you have to write things in such ways that you think that it's really someone's gonna see it and it's gonna change stuff, or you have to consult with a particular client that you think, oh, they're really gonna listen, or whatever. Whereas if you're in a company, you have far more opportunity to
Mm,
actually, change stuff or make things happen or build stuff or whatever. I mean, I can, again, because I'm in media, it's very different. You can make stuff so easily, whether you're freelance or whether you're staff. But, if I was in the lab, I couldn't do my science. It would be so hard to do science as a freelancer. There's not the funding, there's not the support, there's not,
mm,
so I don't think it's necessarily about, if you're valued, if you, you've got a lot of values, and if you're the sort of person that wants to speak your mind and da 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 da, you only should be freelance because that's the only way you get to do it. I just think that I'm fortunate that the job that I've ended up choosing to do allows me to do that. I don't, and I know that, I spoke out when I was at a corporate, but there's plenty of things that I didn't say because I knew that it was not appropriate, or that it wouldn't have,
mm.
I would have got, shunned, or I wouldn't have got put in a project or whatever. So it's, I think it's so dependent on optimizing what it is that you really want to do. I want to speak my mind. But if I really wanted to, I don't know, do a piece of research or build something or whatever, this might actually not be the best route in terms of optimizing for that. So it's really about understanding what it is that you're trying to do with your life. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I feel like everyone has, their own perspective on the end goal.
Absolutely, as they should.
So, you know, when I complain to my mum, say, about, you know, having to make compromises because you're in a corporate
Mhm.
system, and, I feel like I'm not able to fully express myself because it doesn't tie in with the corporate objectives and blah, blah, blah. My mum will say, well, you know, why don't you just keep your head down, because at the end of the day, you're getting a salary every
Mm.
month. And that's her
Mhm.
perspective, because for her, a more important goal is to get a
Yeah,
salary every
stability.
month and have that kind of
Yeah.
stability. Whereas my perspective is that I want to be fully free to express who
Yeah.
I am. And if it is unpopular and if no one gets it, I still want to be able to just be
Yes.
myself.
I get that. I get that a
And
lot.
that is of more value to me than getting a paycheck every month. And
And that's precisely my point. It's about, you have to understand what it is that you personally, as an individual, want to optimize for. And there's literally no shame, no shame in whatever it is, unless it's, I don't know, crime. But like, there's no shame
Yeah.
in whatever it is that you choose to optimize. If your choice of optimization is, I want stability because of I have a family, or because I just want to have my evenings, or whatever it is, if I just want that stability, that's fine. If it's, I'm not really that bothered about speaking out, I'm quite happy doing what I'm doing. Yeah, my boss is a bit of a twat sometimes, but I can handle it and I like my work. Then yeah, optimize for that. Absolutely.
I guess on that note,
Mm,
like if we are optimizing for the choices we've made, we also have to accept the downsides of the choice.
absolutely.
Because I think
100%.
that's what I struggle with. It's like, let's just say I have chosen a corporate situation
Mm,
right now, but I have
mm,
to also accept that what comes with that is compromises in certain areas. I can't
100%.
be a
100%.
freelance mindset and then be in a corporate situation.
No, it's completely true. And, there are downsides to being freelance. There's times that I at the moment where I'm in my career, particularly because I've been working on this book and I've been doing a few other things that have kind of upped my credibility, shall we say, in the eyes of people that don't really understand what I do for a living. But before that, I kind of had to compromise on people just not getting what I did. And I had
Mm,
to constantly justify myself and justify why I was in a certain room or whatever.
mm,
And the person who'd asked me to come be in that room or do the thing, they get it. But the other people there are kind of looking at me like, who are you? Why are you here? And so I constantly had to justify myself, which was really, really, really frustrating, particularly for someone who's so intent on not being misunderstood. So that was a big compromise for me. Whereas before, when I had a job title with a big company that everyone knows, um, nobody questioned it. And so I'm the same person. I have way more knowledge now than I did then. And yet I was seen as more credible then. So that was a compromise for me. Stability, yes, that's a compromise. Mental health is a compromise. I far more stress as a freelancer. I also thrive on the stress, but but it's
yeah,
way
there's
more
more
stressful.
anxiety.
And all different things, not having sick pay, not having holiday pay, not having colleagues, not having, it's Christmas soon, not having a Christmas party to go to.
Mm,
And but for me, these things don't matter as much as the other stuff. And so I've really, really, really thought deeply about what it is that I really want for my career. And because there's been opportunity to go back into corporate, I could go apply for a corporate job tomorrow. I'm not saying I'd get it, but I can apply for them. Um, but I'm choosing not to because of what it is that I really, really want from my career, how I want to live my life. And, it just means I have to work extra hard to make sure I make time for the gym so I don't go mad. But, I think it's, I don't know, I, I think I'm in a fortunate position that I've spent a lot of time really, really, really reflecting on my career. And a lot of that is because when I got made redundant, it put me into a real sort of like, quarter life crisis. And I didn't understand what my identity was, didn't know what I was meant to be doing, and da
mm.
da 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 da.
How long ago was that?
That was 3.5 years ago. So 2016, July 2016. So, there's been a process.
I mean, one of the things that, in terms of like women in very male dominated environments, um, we're talking a lot about sort of making our own choices and accepting all
Mm,
the circumstances that come with the decisions we've made. I get that. But
mm,
I feel, from my experience as a woman, I feel like I've had to make compromises because I'm female that a man
mhm.
wouldn't necessarily need to make, because he absolutely won't stand bullshit from people being told what to do, because he's firmly in his manliness, um,
Yes.
that I think women have to grapple with.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah,
when I'm
definitely.
told that I'm crazy because I'm standing up for myself, I don't think men get that. I think when men stand up for themselves, they're just seen as being strong and
No.
having balls. Yeah.
Or just normal. Just saying what we think. Yeah. I mean, I don't know.
Is there a difference, or am I just trying to jump on the, oh, I'm a woman?
No, I know there's absolutely a difference. I mean, God, there's so much data out there. There's so many stories. There's so many first person accounts that men notice it nowadays as well because they're looking for it. There absolutely, you're not exaggerating. You're not incorrect. Like, it's absolutely true. I would say that I think it's every woman has a different experience. Every person on the planet has a different experience. But I don't think it's fair to sort of say all women deal with X or all women deal with Y, because all women are different. Some are more confident than others. Some have way
Yeah,
more emotional intelligence and can
totally.
deal with situations in better ways. I am not that person. And so I, I think that for me personally, I've spent a lot of time throughout my entire life, but because as I say, I played football from a really young age, and at my primary school, I was the only girl that played. I mean, there's one other girl that played at one point, but she was in a different year than me, and then one that came in at the end. But I spent every single lunch break and playtime, the morning break, playing football with the boys, and I, went and studied maths, which was male dominated. I then went into investment banking, male dominated, and it's not some in some ways I feel a little bit more comfortable in male environments, just because I suppose I'm a bit more used to them, and also because I'm not very good with the whole gossip relationship stuff that I know is very dominant, and not in a bad way, but it's just a different way of doing things in a more female-led environment, which is probably part of the reason I found advertising so difficult, because it's really, really female dominated. Not in leadership positions, but in just general positions. I don't know. I think everyone has a different experience. I think for me personally, there's definitely been points where I have been, people have underestimated me, or have assumed that I'm going to think a certain thing or do things a certain way. And there's been times that it's been very blatant. Like, for instance, when I was in this sort of, the second job, the one that got made redundant from, that was a techie job. And I remember, a guy emailing me saying, "Oh, I'm coming to set this thing up. Can you make sure the tech guy's there?" And I was like, "Yeah, no, that's me. I'll be there." And he was like, "No, we need someone who understands how to set up the technology." And I was like, "Yeah, that's me." And he was like, "Oh, but can I just confirm that you know X, Y, and Z?" And I remember just emailing back being like, "I understand all this. Look, if you don't want to come set this up, it's up to you, but you're being quite sexist right now, and I don't appreciate it." And he was all full of apology. Um, and I think when it's been really explicit, I'm lucky in a sense I have the self-confidence that I will call it out. And it's not just self-confidence, it's also just, I don't know, maybe it's just ballsiness, or maybe it's I was in a position of power because I was at the corporate and he was the supplier and he was trying to get a favor off of us. So I was in a position of power in that respect. So it was much easier for me to be like, no. But there's probably been many times that I've been put in a certain box because of my gender, and I've probably either not noticed it or not immediately felt the effects, or because I am generally been successful most of my career, it's sort of maybe affected me, but I've been able to sort of focus on other things, or kind of be like, well, I'm managing to do this. I mean, one time, probably the point that frustrated me the most, which made me change job actually, because it was an impetus, was when I was in the very first job that I got in advertising, when I was a client person, like dealing with clients. I was hitting all my goals. I, was far exceeding my job description. I absolutely, without a doubt, and I still, even upon reflection, I was without a doubt due a pay rise and due a promotion, and I asked for it many, many times. I remember at one point my boss saying, because he would just my boss would just set new goals, and then I would hit them within like a month or two, and then he'd have to set new goals. And I'd be like, "Why don't you just bloody promote me? Don't stop resetting my goals." But at one point he said to me, "See, to be honest, what we need is you just need to be more like Henry." And so there's this guy called Henry in my team. Henry was lovely, but Henry was the suave, charming, I'm going to go charm the clients and make them feel special, because all the clients are female, of course. And Henry was a crap account person. He was always late with his work. Yep. Yep.
So
And
you
he
were
was doing
doing
all the
all the
charming.
donkey
And for
work.
me, it was like, that was the point that I was like, this job is not for me, because I am not a charmer. I'm a doer. And if that's what it takes to succeed in this
Yeah.
job, to be, frankly, a charming male, which is not what I am, or a subservient woman, neither of those things are me. So I left. I moved, luckily I was going to leave the whole company, but luckily another department scooped me up, and I loved that job that I got taken into. But so I think there's been time, and was that to do with my gender? If every time I tell the story, they're like, "Of course it was." I didn't really think of it part of my gender. I just thought it was a stupid thing to say. But I moved job, and so I think that I'm in a really fortunate position in a sense. I'm self confident, but I'm also not wedded to anything. So if I don't, other than my own work, and so if something happens, I'm like, well, sod this, I'll just go do something else. And I know that I'm privileged in that respect. I know that not
Yeah.
everyone can do that. People have to deal with stuff, or they love their job and they want to be respected and da da da. My way, when I'm not respected, I leave. I'm just like, I'm not going to try and convince this person.
Yeah.
I've already tried. And I don't really care about, yeah, but it also means that I have this real feeling of I'll show them, like constantly. And anytime, like,
Mm.
you know, anytime
Yeah.
I kind of get snubbed for something or whatever, I'm always hoping that, I don't know, that person who I'm connecting with on LinkedIn sees that I've just done this thing. And it's so petty and, you know, maybe a bit childish, but I'm very, very driven by the sort of I'll show them mentality. Is that to do with my gender? Maybe. Is it
Yeah.
just to do with the sort of person I am?
Mm.
Probably more likely. But I think my personal experience with gender is probably more sort of noticing it with other women and speaking out when I do see it, and speaking out with other women too. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that is really the reason why I started this podcast, because I really stand up for myself. I find that as a woman, um, I am often, expected to look pretty and keep my
Mm,
mouth shut, when actually I have really strong values, I have really strong opinions, and I really want to make a difference through my
mm,
work. And I don't want to follow people, that I don't
mm.
admire. And, there's a bunch of things. And basically, as a result of all of that, I'm seen to be a
Yeah.
problem. I'm seen to be difficult. I'm seen, and, you know, there are times when I can take it,
Mm,
and I'm confident and strong enough to just go, well, I'm sorry that you feel that way. But there are times when I start to doubt
yeah, of
myself,
course.
and I'm
Of
like,
course.
am I
Of
crazy?
course.
Are they
Of
right?
course.
Am I making life a lot harder for myself because I so desperately want to stick to what I believe is truth
Mm,
and fair and all of that? And it makes me wobble. It
of
really
course.
makes me wobble. And I think, if I had more of a sort of male attitude, for want of a better label,
Mm,
I would be a lot further. But I do get stuck on people
yeah.
branding me as difficult,
Yeah.
because I'm just like, why can't you just be open to my opinion? And
Yeah.
I don't think I'm alone. I feel that a
No, you're
lot of
not.
strong women go through this,
Absolutely.
and I don't know, how do we cope with this? Like, do you have any sort
I
of suggestions?
Yeah, I think there's two ways of looking at things. I think that there's the, shall we say, the activist approach, which is let's change things. I've seen this happen. I'm going to campaign against it. I'm going to make stuff at this company, this organization, in society, whatever, shift because I've seen this happen and I don't agree with it. And then there's another approach, which is you see it, you acknowledge it, you are like, this is not right. And then you get the hell out of there and go find someone else. And that's not about running away. It's about going, I ain't got the time to be the activist. I want to get on with my career, or I want to do other
Yeah.
stuff. I don't want to be that person. And and then there's obviously the third one, which is you suffer through it. And you're not, none of those is the better thing. Women, this whole idea of being a strong woman, when I was younger, I was very like, I'm really proud of the fact that I'm a strong woman. But then someone challenged me once and they were like, why should you have to be? Why can't you just be a woman, or be a person? And I think that's kind of that's the sort of activist attitude of like, we should fight against it. In
Mm.
my mind, I'm all for activism. I think it's amazing. I don't think of myself as an activist because I'm like, I don't want, or at least I'm not a direct activist. Maybe I'm an indirect activist by having conversations like this and chatting to my friends about stuff and empowering people. But I'm certainly, and I'll call things out, but I don't necessarily escalate things or try and do a big campaign or whatever.
Mm.
Um, and the reason is because I want to get on with my life. I
Yeah.
want to get on with making stuff. I want to do my journalism. I want to do whatever it is that I'm doing. I want to write my book. I want to whatever. And so like as an example, I got sexually assaulted a couple of years ago, and it was before Me Too, so there wasn't really a sort of I'm not saying it's easier after Me Too, but there wasn't really, I didn't really know what to do,
Mm.
shall we say.
Yeah.
because there wasn't that sort of media coverage. And a month after it happened, I had a really, really horrific month where, you know, and all the usual stuff you hear about women after they're sexually assaulted, they go into this spiral of self-doubt and
Yeah.
hate and
Did
don't
I
know what to
encourage
do and
it?
da-da-da-da.
Was it my fault?
Yes,
Yeah.
all that stuff. Exactly. All that stuff. Total standard. I was not myself that month. It was a dark, dark month. It was weird as anything when I think back on it. It just was, I was not me. And a month after it happened, I wrote a Medium blog about it and I put it up on my Medium. And it, you know, as you can imagine, pre Me Too, when there's not really anyone writing about this stuff, it got a really big response and I got a lot of amazing comments, a lot of women reaching out going, oh yeah, this happened to me as well, and blah, 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 all that stuff. And after that, I got a lot of people messaging me being like, hey, could you come speak at our conference about women in tech, about treatment of, because it happened at a tech conference. Could you come and, you know, be the voice and da 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 da. And I decided, I did one at South by Southwest, but I didn't take, I said no to every single other opportunity. And the reason I did that is because I don't want to be the woman who talks about sexual assault. I don't want to be, you know, my name, the person who does sexual assault stuff. That's me. I'm not an expert in that. I don't, you know, people who work in sexual assault charities or activism campaigns or whatever are the ones that should be talking about it, not me. I want to be the person who writes about science and tech and the world and all the thoughts I have in my head that I think are far more valuable and insightful than what I think about sexual assault, other than my own first person narrative. And so I made that choice that I didn't want to be that person. And I went through a whole stuff like, am I being selfish by not talking more about this? Do I have a responsibility to stand up and be that woman? You know, all that stuff. And, you know, when I think back on it, it's like, no, I just chose to carry on with the sort of journey that I wanted to be on, which was to do with my career. And I am amazed and thankful and in awe of the women that choose the path of activism, of choose the path of something happened to them, campaign against it, try and make change, da 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 da. But I don't have the patience for it. My ambition sits elsewhere. And I think that when you're talking about advice around when something like this happens, I think it's about choosing which camp you're in, or choosing in that moment which one you want to be in, and then taking deliberate action to make that happen. So if you're in the activism one, it's okay, what can I do to change this? How can I talk about this? How can I stand up? How can I get help? Da, 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 whatever. The second one, which is the one that I do, which is, this has happened, I don't like it, I've called it out, I've told them it's wrong, but I'm now going to move on with my life. And that's either get the hell out of that situation or go and work for someone else. No job is the best job in the world. There are plenty of other jobs, in my opinion, and there's plenty of other projects that you can do. That's not about running away. It's about choosing and optimizing for what you want. If it really is that job, then you're going to have to take the activism approach to try and change it, right? But for me, there's never been the thing that I've been working on that has happened to. It's never been the thing. Like if someone came and been really horrific about my book, maybe I would take the activism approach because that's the thing that's most dear to me. Who knows? And then if it's the third one where it's, you know, you want that stability, you want the easy life, quote unquote, the easy life. You don't want to have to do either of those things. You want to stay in your job. You want to, you know, then it's about making a decision about how you sit with the information. Is it that you complain, or is it that you decide to swallow it? You know, everyone is entitled to their own way of dealing with stuff. And I think it's not about saying this is the way that you should deal with certain things that happen, whether it's a comment or an assault or whatever. It's about respecting the decision of the female, of the person, to do what is best for them. Where I guess
It's about being true to yourself.
absolutely. And I think where some of the, not the problems, but where people, I think, end up getting frustrated, it's when they know what they would want to do, but they don't feel able to do it. And it's about how can we support those people, whether it's helping them find another role or helping them get a different manager or empowering the work that they're doing and sodding the person that's wronging them, or whatever, or helping them be an activist or helping them deal with their trauma or whatever it is. So I think that it's just about being really sure, or as sure as you can be, because you're never 100% sure in your own head about which of those routes it is. And for me, it's almost always the middle one. And I don't perceive it as running away. Some people might, you know, I don't perceive it as running away. I perceive it as I've done my piece, I've said my bit, I'm at peace with what, you know, because I don't say nothing. I have to say something, but then I don't then try and do all the work to continue being in that space, because I don't want to be there anymore. I want to go and do other stuff. And luckily for me, I can go find somewhere else to be that I'm even happier. And because I don't settle for less, if I move to somewhere else, it's always better, or I will make it better, or I'll be able to frame it in a way that's better, so that I don't have these kind of regrets or whatever. And if I have the regret, I'll go back and try and change it. So I think it's again just about trying to work out precisely what, not just what your values are, but like what it is you want from life. You only live once.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of, you have to work out what it is you're trying to do. And, there's so many times writing this book where I've when I've been reporting stuff or meeting people and I'm seeing things, not just women's stuff, but like, things that are not right in particular industries. And I'm like, God, I should write an investigative piece about this. I should write an article, da, 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 da. And I'll talk to my boyfriend about it and he'll be like, that's great if you want to do that, but are you happy to spend the next 2 months, 6 months, a year focusing on this thing and it being in your head? And almost always the answer is no, because I'm like, no, I want to be doing the thing that I was doing. And so I think it's about being realistic about your life. And sometimes you don't have the choice. I mean, being sexually assaulted, I did not choose to have that month of, it was horrific for me. And that was actually one of the things that I got so frustrated about over and over again. I was like, I did not choose this. This has been imposed upon me. And I can't believe that I'm having to deal with this. I've got all this other stuff I want to be doing. I've got my ambition. I've got my projects. I've got my work. I've got everything. And I'm being halted by this one man's idiocy and horrificness and entitlement. And that was one of the things that got me so angry. But I had to make a decision at one point to be like, I don't want to be affected by this anymore. I want to get on with my life. And that was that took a long time for me to do. That wasn't easy by any means whatsoever. I'm fortunate that I was able to start moving on after about 2 months. Some people it takes a lot longer, and that's totally okay. But again, it's about that. It's about taking control and trying to have reclaiming as much of the power as you possibly can in any way possible. That's how I got over it.
Wow. I mean, unfortunately we're out of time, but I feel like I wish that we could talk for many more hours, because I feel like there's so much to learn from you, in the sense that you really are in your own corner. And I think many women in STEM either are reaching out for others to be in their corner to feel valid, or they're struggling with knowing how to be in their own corner. And you really represent someone that is your own cheerleader. And I absolutely am utterly inspired and in awe of your ability to do that. And I've learned so much from listening to you today.
Oh, Shani, I really appreciate that. I mean, I don't know. When you're freelance, you have a lot of time on your own, and so you think a lot. And I think if I was to give any advice to anyone about anything, whether it's jobs, careers, women stuff, whatever, it would be, if you can't journal, because I don't journal, I don't have the time for it, and I don't have the patience for it. But I go like 20-minute walks and I do voice memos. Yeah. I just talk to myself. If you put your headphones in, you look like you're on the phone, so nobody thinks you're weird that you're talking to yourself. But I record it so that I feel like I'm doing something. I don't ever listen back. But anyway, that would be my biggest piece of advice, because see, to be honest, like I think that if you spend the time really trying to understand what's going on in your own head, you're not going to get it perfect. It's not easy to understand what's going on in your head. But if you just spend the time, invest the time talking to yourself or writing it down, or whatever your method is, it's the best way to try and get that clarity and that kind of, you're able to reflect back on your actions. I notice when I'm being an absolute asshole when I'm doing those voice memos. I'm like, oh my God, I said that thing. I thought that was right. I've just realized it wasn't. I'm going to need to go apologize or whatever. And it's only because I make the time to reflect. If I didn't do that, I would just be keeping doing the next thing and charging through life and not thinking. So if there's one piece of advice, I would say it's that.
An absolute brilliant note to end on. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And I just wanted to, because you referenced a couple of books that you're either writing or have written. If anyone is interested in hearing more from you and getting in touch, would it be okay if they emailed me through my website, which I could forward on to you?
Of course. I mean, yeah, as I said earlier, I really haven't said anything that I wouldn't. I mean, I love that you're doing this anonymously. I think it makes so much sense, and it gives people so much power. But there's definitely nothing I've said that I would be worried about. So anyone can, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, brilliant. So listeners, thank you so much for tuning in this week. I have been massively touched by hearing from my guest today. I'm sure you listeners out there have also gained so much from hearing such wise words. And if you do want to get in touch, please do contact me through my website, key in my name. It will come up on Google, and you can get in touch. But don't forget to rate and review the show. Thank you so much for listening, and catch you next week on Scilence.